right now.
Counter right here.
So we'll call the meeting to order. Good evening, everybody. It is 7:01 and let's begin. The first item on the agenda, as always, is public comment. General issues of the day. It does not have to be something that is on the agenda. It can be. But are there people here who wish to make public comment? No? Okay. Come on up. So if you can state your name for the record, although I think I know.
My name is Jeremy Harriman. I represent the Williston Professional Firefighters of Local 4611. Myself and my e-board member, James Wells, are here tonight to talk about some issues we've noticed with the proposal for the fiscal year 2025. Before we start, we'd like to ask, just as a courtesy to everyone here tonight, if you would like us to defer this time to the work session of the budget or to just continue as during this.
I think continue.
Okay. So as you may or may not know, we've been in a contract negotiation with the town since April of 23. This contract has been negotiated for 3 years with a goal of recruitment and retention, with various proposals, regarding health and safety, our operational values, even the way we dress, as well as compensation. And unfortunately, we have not been able to get to as many of those other proposals too deeply because we've been working out compensation issues between ourselves and the town. The issues that have come up during negotiations have been anywhere from, a lack of understanding of how we do math and finances, of how we give proposals back and forth. For example, we would give a financial proposal, and we receive an exercise, quote unquote, in return. And often these exercises would be incomplete or inaccurate. So it became difficult to try and negotiate in terms that everybody was understanding. And at times we were accused of negotiating unfairly with the town. We also, during this time, talked about why we were trying to retain employees and gain recruitment, because going up to this point, we had employees that were concerned about leaving the department for other departments to make more money or other opportunities to make more money. The town seemingly ignored this, and when it did finally come to fruition and we lost 2 members, one transferred within the town and another moved out, we have now a recruitment class in session with another scheduled for April due to more employees leaving. This was brought up during negotiations, and it had no effect on how we negotiated, and we're now at an impasse. So bringing back full circle to the point of why we're here tonight, we've noticed a few discrepancies in this fair bargaining practice of the 2025 fiscal budget being set before we've had one meeting in mediation. So again, we're going to be budgeting, or we're going to be arguing for a budget for our employees, for our membership, on a budget that's going to be voted for and passed without having an official meeting to try and solve this before it's done. So at this time, I'm going to defer to my associate to talk more of the finer details of our financial proposals.
So again, my name is James Wells. I'm the treasurer for Local 4611. And our chief concern with the budget proposal right now is the compensation items for the fire department do not seem to accommodate what the union has proposed thus far. and they seem to accommodate just what the town has proposed. And I think where we're concerned about that is if this budget goes to the voters and is approved, and we continue on this path of mediation and possibly fact-finding and binding arbitration, we'll find ourselves in a position, possibly, if the union prevails, where the compensation awarded to us would be greater than is approved in the budget. And so we want to make that transparent with the Williston voters. We think it's owed to them for them to understand that, but also see if that's something that we can start to address before this goes to a vote before the town. And where we're at now, we have figures prepared, if you would like them, on how much more we think would need to go into those line items. And we can offer those to you. And we can also entertain any questions. And again, out of respect for other people that might have public comment, we can also save those discussions for the work session, if you would like. But ultimately, we're just trying to avoid a situation where the town will be forced to find other ways to accommodate the compensation of the union that maybe the voters didn't necessarily agree to.
Okay. Do you have the number now? The numbers?
The number that our estimate is that it would be an additional $40,000 to $50,000 that would need to be added to the total compensation items for the career staff.
Okay. Okay. What's the board's discretion? Are there questions that you'd ask now, or do you want to wait and go into the work session on the budget? I don't think it makes much difference. But so, if there are questions, so the shortfall would be $40,000 or $50,000. Is that what I'm understanding? Okay. All right. Okay. I hear you. There's not much more I can say. But thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for your time to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, any other public comment in the room? Is there anybody online?
Nope, no one on Zoom, Ted.
Okay. Moving on, Green Mountain Transit update. Hi, everybody. Hello.
I think Chapin's on Zoom.
Yep.
All right.
My name's Clayton Clark, and I'm the general manager for Green Mountain Transit, and I'm very happy to be here for the first time in that role to talk to you about what's happening. I'm going to talk about our assessment, of course, but also a little bit about our return to fares, some of the things that we're looking at in the future, and just some background about Green Mountain Transit. Very happy to be here with Amy Brewer, who is our vice chair of the Board of Commissioners, and then online with Chapin Kaner. I think that these two are really doing the community of Williston a great service with their work on the GMT board. I've really enjoyed working with them. I've been in my position, tomorrow is my 1-year anniversary, and I found that they've been extremely helpful to me in transitioning to this role, and they do a great job in guiding the board in a way that I think that you would be proud of. So to provide a little bit of background on Green Mountain Transit, there are 7 transit agencies that operate within the state of Vermont. 6 of them are nonprofits, and Green Mountain Transit is the outlier where we're actually a municipality that is set in statute. And our traditional service area, starting in 1973 when the statute was put in place, was in the Chittenden County area with what was used to be CCTA. That expanded a little over 10 years ago to include areas with Franklin County, Washington County, some Lamoille County, and Grand Isle. And so one of the things that makes GMT sort of special is that there's only a handful of transit agencies in the country that have both a urban transit system and a rural transit system. And so what that means is that the funding that comes through the Federal Transit Administration, there's separate rules and separate funding sources for rural transit and urban transit. So in some ways, GMT is kind of like 2 separate transit agencies that share a common board of commissioners and a common management team. And so that gives us some opportunities that some other organizations don't have, but it also creates some challenges just because we are operating with 2 very different sets of federal requirements for how we operate, and they're pretty different between the 2. So focusing on what is going on here in our urban system, Williston has the distinction of being the source of our number 1 urban route. And it's the number 1 route. It is the Williston line number 1 that goes from Williston to the Downtown Transit Center in Burlington. It represents 23% of our total ridership within the urban area is on this line. And last year there was 477,000 riders that used that. Now, not all of those riders, originated in Williston, but that's what the total route ridership was. And we also have service from the number 10, which had 344,000 riders, which is about 17% of the service. So between those 2 lines, that's 40% of the service that we offer to Chittenden County with our fixed route service. And so I wanted to start off with that to let you know what you all are contributing towards before I get to the bad part, which is that this of course costs money. And the thing that I need to apologize to Eric and making his life more difficult and budgeting, and to you all, is that the assessment that we have for you all is a 9% increase this year. And that is a lot, and I recognize that it's a lot, and I know that that's going to put strain on your municipality, and I just want to make sure you know that I understand that and wish that weren't the case. I'm going to walk through a little bit of what got us there so that you could understand why this happened. So first off, when people think about Green Mountain Transit, they often think about the fixed route service. That's our big buses that carry lots of folks, and that's part of the fixed route assessment. And that portion of the assessment only went up 2.7%. Now, we had originally thought that was going to go up 4% for you all, but it ended up being the lower 2.7%. And the reason why is that our Board of Commissioners decided to do a true-up exercise with our route funding. And so what that means is that historically, so that there is more certainty and less volatility when it comes to your fixed route assessments, what we do is that the increases that happen year over year have typically been 4%. That makes it nice and predictable and makes your budgeting easier. What we do is a true-up exercise every so often that ties your fixed route assessment to the actual level of service that is being provided, because sometimes that will get a little bit out of alignment. And so by doing that exercise, that meant that this year we only needed to go up 2.7% to get that back where it needed to be. So that's the good news. So what is the driver for the for the 9% increase? And the driver for that really is, and you can see this in the assessment letter that we had sent to Eric, is our paratransit assessment. And so one of the things that people may not realize is that when somebody lives within 3/4 of a mile of one of our routes, and they have a disability that would preclude them from being able to use that fixed route transit, that we're required by law to have transit provided for them. And so that's what the paratransit assessment comes from, and that's a service that's provided by SSTA. And so this is a door-to-door service where somebody will arrange a ride with SSTA. SSTA will have one of their vehicles come to that person's house, and then will bring them to wherever it is that they need to go. And so so the paratransit assessment is based on actual usage each year. And so and that program increased an amazing 55% over the previous year. And one of the things about this program is that because users of it tend to use it somewhat frequently, just having a few people move in or out of your community that are eligible for that service really, drives that assessment. And so what you'll see is that, going up and down considerably based on that migration. One of the things that the GMT Board of Commissioners has done to make it less shocking to the communities that we work with is that we're going through a new assessment model, which will be based on a 3-year running average. And so then that way we can avoid these years when we have a 55% increase and have that spread out over time. And if we see that it's just a temporary blip up and then it comes back down, then again, you all will be protected from that. Letting you know why it's 55% here in Williston is that first off, overall, the ADA rides that we provided over the past year, system-wide within Chittenden County increased by 20%. So throughout all of our communities, the total ridership went up by 20%. And in Williston, the share of the rides the previous year had been 3.6% of our total ADA rides. And this year it was 5%. So that, was a pretty significant jump. That certainly drove the big increase. A small part of that increase also is that SSTA, like a lot of the providers that are struggling to get staff, struggling to find the people to be able to carry out their mission, they've had higher costs, and that also has been some of the driver. But I want to make sure that it's clear that really it's the total numbers that's what's the main factor there. A little bit later, I'm going to talk about how we're going to be returning to fare service. And one of the things is that the return to fares will also have an impact on the paratransit assessment, because just as our fixed routes have been fare-free for the past few years, we have been required to then make these paratransit rides fare-free as well, because we can't charge a fee to somebody who has a disability that we wouldn't charge to somebody without. So when we return to fare service, that will apply both to our fixed routes and to our paratransit ADA rides. And we think that will end up having folks be more selective in how they use the service, because what is now a free door-to-door round trip is actually going to cost them $6 to do once fares return in March. we think that that will likely decrease the overall number of rides that are provided, and that would end up providing some assessment relief for the program. I'm going to talk a little bit about the pressures that we're looking at. The first thing that I want to start off with is, and I'd mentioned before, is the labor pressures. And so when I had arrived here last year, roughly 1 in 3, if you saw one of our buses out in the community, there was a 1 in 3 chance that the driver driving that bus was on overtime. And some of that overtime was forced overtime, meaning that they didn't want to be out there. We are contractually able to say, oh, you're going to have to work longer today. And so that's a double time rate. And so when you think about the costs of having a third of your routes covered by somebody who's on overtime, and many of those folks are getting double time instead of time and a half, certainly that's a concern that we have. One of the things I want to emphasize is that even with that overtime rate, 2.7% was the only increase that we needed on that fixed route. So we actually are happy that we are able to keep that so low. What we did is that previously we had a lower starting wage for our new drivers. We changed that. Previously, a driver had to be with us for a full year before they would get the full wage. We negotiated mid-contract with the Teamsters that represent our urban drivers. And what we did is that we had it so that people would start on day one with the full rate. That has really helped us with recruitment. And the thing that's been nice is that it's helped us with recruitment without a super huge increase in the labor costs, because our existing staff, didn't get that huge increase because it went from $21.50 an hour for the starting wage to $28 an hour. And so the good news is that that's become much more attractive for people, and our overtime rate has dropped into the mid to high 20s. And when we get further folks through training, that will continue to drop. And our hopes are that will then help make fixed route service continue to be somewhat affordable for our municipalities and keep those assessment increases lower. Labor scarcity for CDL drivers definitely is one of the biggest threats that we see long term with being able to provide our current level of service or a higher level of service. And so that makes GMT very much like, many of the other organizations that serve our communities, whether it's our emergency response staff, police departments, social workers, healthcare personnel, and so we're part of that mix. Fiscal pressures, we have been very lucky in that GMT was able to receive significant COVID relief funds. Like a lot of municipalities, like state government, those COVID relief funds are going to be coming to. We're going to be exhausting them. We're projected to run out of them sometime in fiscal year 26. Unfortunately, we provide more service than the revenue that we generate outside of those relief funds, and by fiscal year 27, we're going to be looking at about a $3 million hole that unless we identify additional revenue sources, that we're going to need to fill that in order to maintain our existing service levels. One of the things that I want to make sure that is that revenue replacement is my highest priority as the general manager. And I'm not going to be coming here looking for you all to fill that hole entirely, because I know that you all are probably going over a similar fiscal cliff, and that's just not going to be an expectation that we have.
Question on it?
Absolutely.
I had the impression that federal funds were going towards the free fare.
They were, and that's how we chose to use some of those federal funds, and so yes,
So
but
part of that $3 million is going to be replaced with fares.
Yes,
Part of
some,
3 million is removed.
but what I should say is that even with our return to fairs, our projected deficit will be roughly $3 million. Yeah, yeah. The one of the things that that we're going to be looking at is if there's other non-federal revenue sources, i.e. taxes, that would come, in some other way through the state. And the transportation committees and the legislature asked us to do a study this year where we would look at other ways to generate revenue that wouldn't be just coming to the municipalities. And that report is going to be provided to them, next week. The report considered all sorts of things. I mean, it even considered, hey, how much money would we generate if we put toll booths on 89? Obviously, we're not going to go down that path. There are a few things that seem like they may be more feasible, but ultimately, it's going to be the transportation committees that are going to be, thinking about how to replace those funds. And one of the things that I'm going to be doing is that my background is not in transit. My background is in human services. I very much see public transit as an extension of my career in human services. And I think that one of the things that we need to do is look at how we can find, I got ahead of myself. One of the things that I noticed in my career in human services is it didn't matter whether I was working in Veterans Affairs, working in Adult Protective Services, working at Voc Rehab, transportation was always a barrier to the folks that we were, working with. And one of the things that I would like to see is that, hey, let's work better with the Agency of Human Services, because the reality is that our $3 million hole is pretty small compared to the funding that they provide, to provide the services that they do. And so that's a partnership that we would like to explore. Getting to the fairs, I could talk for several hours with you about what our new fare system is going to be like. And I'm just going to cover it briefly. And if in the questions you want to, me to go down some of those rabbit holes, I'd be really happy to. But I don't want to nerd out on you. And if that's not what you want. And so fares are to return on March 6th. It's a Wednesday, so you're probably like, well, why would we have them return on Wednesday? It's because March 5th is town meeting day, and we did not want anyone to have confusion over fares be the reason why they didn't go out to vote. And so we were just like, you know what? We'll start it the day after. And one of the things that we like about the system is that it's going to be much smarter. And what that means is that it will give more opportunities for people to pay instead of just cash. They'll be able to pay with their smartphone. They'll be able to pay with a smart card, a credit card, and they'll also be able to pay with cash. And the thing that is going to be nice is that the system, when we have cash-based riders, people paying with cash, we don't necessarily know, like, well, how many people got on at this stop, how many people got on at this stop. And so we're going to have a lot more granular data, which means that in future years when we come back to you, if you said, hey, we want to know, more about who's using these particular stops, we would actually have the data to be able to talk to you about that. And I think that that's going to make our work with the municipalities much better. And the last thing before I turn it over to you all for questions, just thinking about future considerations. So I talked about a fiscal cliff. My hope is that we Evel Knievel it and get to the other side of the cliff, and we don't Thelma and Louise it. So let's say that in a few years that we are able to think about, hey, what would some new services look like? In the past year, we did some studies on what those things could be. One of those was looking at having a fixed route service that would continue on Route 2 and go all the way to Richmond. That potentially could be good at increasing the commuting corridor further into Chittenden County. And then the other thing that we looked at would be potentially having microtransit here in Williston. Right now, GMT operates the MyRide microtransit system in Montpelier. It was the first microtransit experiment. And what that is it's kind of like a less sexy version of Uber. And it does provide, people the door-to-door service, but it's not quite instantly on demand. It's, there's a bit of a wait. You may have to ride with other folks, but that's sort of the concept. And the thought there would be that we would use that to get people in the parts of Williston that don't have easy access to the fixed route, that microtransit would be able to get them to that. One of the things that we are sensitive about, of course, is that these services would require, more local contributions. And so we would be working with you closely to make sure that it's a service that you want and a service that you can afford. So we're not going to come in and impose new services on you without, and then increasing your assessment, without making sure that that's the direction that you want to go in. And so that was the things that I had. I don't know if Amy or Chapin, there's anything that you would like to bring up. And very definitely happy to answer questions. And I'll be sad if I don't get to talk about the fairs a little bit more. But I'm sure that you all will. It sounds like you have a lot of budgetary work to do. I did see that you were, if you have a need for ideas for how to use your ARPA funds, GMT is a great investment, so feel free to send some of those our way.
Appreciate that. So Amy, Chapin, anything to add?
I don't have a lot to add. Clayton did a really thorough job. I've been here before. I've kind of shared with you, it's my goal to encourage people to use our transit more, since it's really very convenient for going lots of places, South Burlington and Burlington, as well as Essex. And so I've written articles in the newspaper to, the Observer, to try to talk about it. I do have a draft statement for the town report, which I think is probably overdue, but I should be able to get it tomorrow, maybe. And so, my goal is to make it so that it's easier for everybody to access, because it solves a lot of different problems. And so that's kind of how I've been representing us on the board. And, obviously looking for a fair service that, helps people rather than, anything else. So that's my statement.
Okay, thanks. Chapin?
Are the same ones that we faced when I joined the board back in 2014. But Clayton is a new face, is a new perspective, and a great leader. And I really appreciate his perspective. And I also just want to congratulate Amy on not only taking the commissioner, but joining the leadership team, vice chair. It's wonderful. It's better than I agreed. And then I want to emphasize that probably regional transit town by town makes no sense. South Burlington would drop out of transit. How would we afford the number one bus? It doesn't make sense to have a town by town assessment for a regional service.
Yeah.
And yet you haven't cracked that tonight yet. However, both in terms of the equity it's provided by having transit available to everybody, and also long-term cost savings. If we get 10% of people going on the bus, that reduces by 10% the pressure on intersections that might have been upgraded, and the savings start to add up pretty fast. So, and the other thing is, we know from our housing study, Williston does not provide housing for many of the retail workers who work in the California area, and they are not able to do it at a sort of transit. It's basically a bridge for many of those people. So I feel like it's really important to the community, but it's not being funded the right way, and we eventually get out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
I have to claim ignorance. I live in rural Williston. I've never had the need of a bus. So I don't have any idea how many buses that you run, or the schedule that you have, or whether it's 7 days a week or 5 days a week. I don't.
Yeah, we have about 70 buses in our urban fleet, and they're all 35 to 40 footers. And so It's definitely a large operation, and we have a bus barn that, contains almost all of those. And let me tell you, I was in awe when I first joined and like walked in and you see a 60,000-pound bus in the air, people working on it in a building that's holding 60 buses all piled in. And so the number one route, it operates 7 days a week during Monday through Friday. It's 20-minute service. And I can't remember off the top of my head what that is on the weekend. But it's the thing about fixed route is that it's really where you're at. And so if you are in rural Williston, that fixed route's probably not very helpful to you where you're at. And I think that's where, the new ideas of microtransit to get you connected to it would make sense. And so that, we live in a car culture for a reason, the way, especially in a place like Vermont, which has so many people living in small towns. It's going to be difficult to have, folks be car free outside of city centers. So I'm not going to tell you the pipe dream that, hey, we can all just use public transit and we don't need our vehicles anymore. But certainly what our hope is that people who are a little further out of town are going to be able to rely on transit more than they have in the past, that they would be able to at least have the option of using it where they haven't been able to have it before. But you hit the nail on the head, is that, transit is very much location. And so, and I remember when I was in the military, and I was stationed in the Washington, D.C. area, like, where did I get my apartment? Across the street from the metro, and so we do know that people, choose where they try to be with public transit in mind.
I'd also add that the new park and ride here in Williston is served by the bus. So for those of us not on the bus, I'm on the bus line, but for those people who are not on a bus line, you could conceivably, drive to a space, jump on the bus, and take it downtown. So you to park downtown Burlington or to the mall or, a variety of to appointments or whatever. So there's creative ways to experiment with it. And now is a really great time since it's fare free and, take a time when you have a chunk of time to kind of fool around with it and you can meander around places.
Yeah.
Look how excited you all looked.
How can we make the public more aware of bus routes?
Well, I can tell you that we have a marketing section, and we have found that things like TV advertisement just probably is not a good, use of our taxpayer dollars, and so we do a lot on social media. We do advertisements. The buses themselves are sort of the advertisements, and that's actually the way we generate some of our non-tax revenue. Is by the businesses advertising there. I can tell you that, the reality is that if people are struggling, with transportation, they tend to find us, and out of necessity. And I don't mean to sound flip or to sound like we don't value the importance of marketing, because if nothing else, marketing is what makes sure that your taxpayers know that, hey, the money that our community provides to this service, this is what it's doing. I can tell you that, and this is not intended to be critical at all of my predecessors, I think that we haven't done as good a job as telling the story of our service as we need to. Mm.
Further questions?
Well, I appreciate you redoing the numbers on the bus service, because that certainly helped offset this kind of stunning SSTA increase. I mean, $18,000 is half of the money we're looking for the Environmental Reserve Fund. It's gone to pay for SSTA, which it obviously it's a need. Obviously, it's a need for people that we definitely want to serve. And if you have the numbers, I can't argue it with you, right? If that's what we're using and we're paying for what we're using, then That's hard to argue that we have to pay that. Just for my information, is SSTA is it a separate like fund, and is it Human Services pay for any of that, or is it all coming out of?
Yes, and so so SSTA is a separate nonprofit, and they are a contractor of ours, and we contract with them to do the ADA rides, but they also do Medicaid non-emergency medical transit, and so that is money that comes from DEVA through the Medicaid program to them. And they also do a program that's older persons and disabled, OND. It used to be called END, and so if folks are familiar with the END acronym, we changed it because elderly sounds kind of, as I get older, I'm more sensitive to, I don't like that word. And so that is a program where
That's actually a line item that went.
oh, exactly, and you all contribute directly to them for that, and so that is what you would find where some of the human services type transportation will come through SSTA for there. Now, outside of Chittenden County, GMT does all of that itself internally. So like in Washington County, we do the fixed route, we do the ADA, we do the Medicaid, we do all of that. But that's just a very, the scale there is so much, different. We're not measuring in millions of riders, it's, thousands of riders.
Thank you. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you. And,
Great.
I pulled a trick on you.
Yeah.
And that is that when I give my handouts in advance, then every time I look at somebody, they're just looking down. So I have much of what I talked about here. I'm going to send Eric an electronic copy. And so if you don't remember everything that I said, here is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Excellent.
Thank you, Clayton.
Thank you.
Williston should get a little rebate for like making 40% of your ridership a nice easy 6-mile shoot down Route 2. That's got to be a moneymaker for you.
I think so. I hope. And I wish you all, I'm so glad that I made it on time because I didn't realize it's nasty out there.
Yeah.
And so I hope that you get home safely. And thank you very much, everybody.
What's the fare gonna be?
Yes.
Nobody asked that.
I got a fair question. So the full priced fare will be $2, and the discount price fare will be $1. Okay. And we provide that discount, or I should say, for children under 6, it's free. Children 6 to 17, it's the discounted $1. For folks who are 60 and older, it's the discounted $1. And for anyone who self-identifies as disabled, we do not do any type of check. If they say, hey, I have a disability, it's $1. The thing that's going to be really cool about our new system is that to make sure that our riders are financially protected, it has a fare capping system. So in the past, if you wanted the best price, you had to put money up front and buy a monthly pass. And we realized that can be a major burden to have somebody have to fork over $50. And so what we're going to do with the new system, because it is smart and it's keeping track and it knows that, hey, Johnny got on, and used the service today, is that once you get up to $50 for the month, it'll stop charging you. Mm-hmm. And so you can keep using it and you'll still swipe your pass, but you won't be charged. And there will also be, and if you get the discounted rate, it's $25. And the fare cap for the day, so will be $2 if you get the discount, and $4 if you don't. So you can ride all day long for $4 or $2 if you have the discount. The other thing that you can see I'm excited about this.
It sounded better.
Yes.
Wait till I'm 60.
Yeah. We used to also, the link routes that connect Montpelier to Burlington and that stops at the Williston Park and Ride, and the St. Albans to Burlington, those used to be $4. And we said, you know what, it's too complicated to have multiple rates. So we've made them the same price. And it used to be $150 per month to ride the link, to get the link monthly pass. And we're saying, no, the same $50 is going to apply. So one of the things that's nice about the new system is that $50 will give you unlimited ridership from St. Albans through Chittenden County and all the Chittenden County service into Washington County, so that you can travel in this region for $50 a month. And we think that that's a good value.
Great. Thank
you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Ed, I had someone online that wanted to speak during public comment.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I can
Let's
connect to.
go ahead. Let's do that.
Hey, Terry, I'm going to connect you now. Terry Marin.
Wrong.
Yep, we can hear you.
Yep.
like depending on the tax rate, neighboring towns, Burlington, and South Burlington are using that model, and Shelter is thinking about having the select board putting that on the ballot and having it for the, depending on the tax rate. And they anticipate that this will raise in 1 year $170,000 to be used for conservation of local species. Thank you very much for letting me speak. And I go to town, get the land funds after COVID, or during COVID. The town parcels really were used heavily, and meeting more people means more space that's needed to people to get out and recreate. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you, Terry. And actually, that does segue us into the fiscal year 2025 budget work session. So in that regard, Eric, you've prepared a memo. If you can give us a highlight of, I guess, basically your memo substance, and then we'll open it up to discussion.
Sure. So following the board's meeting last week, gave staff some homework to look at some potential budget changes here as you work to finalize the warning for town meeting this month. So I worked with Shirley to look at these numbers. We ran a couple scenarios just kind of as baselines to start your discussion. I think I say in my memo, you can kind of take this a la carte, looking at different elements of the budget and landing on a final number. So of those, pulled out for discussion in the memo here, it sounded like consensus of the board was to try to aim for around a 9.5% target expense rate to open your discussion with this week. So those are right around that number as we get into the details here. But the primary elements that are discussed in this memo, I won't go through all the details. It was kind of a longer memo, so all the elements of moving pieces here. So discussion about a police detective position, starting about a half year, and describe how the mechanics of that. Fill that likely with an incumbent staff member, then we need to backfill that open patrol position and how those pieces move together. Discussion on a human resources director position. There was talk of perhaps starting it halfway through the year. Staff wants to suggest for the board's consideration tonight just the timing of having a position begin in January of the year would be challenging in terms of recruitment leading up to January. And also this time of year with working to decouple those duties from the finance director's position as we develop the budget and the audit and closing the books. So we'll certainly make anything work as the board considers funding this position. It's certainly an important position for the town. But just to raise those for the board, we include some elements. If you were to back up the potential start date, is probably about $11,000 a month or so towards that position for each month out of the fiscal year we calculated. So point of discussion for tonight as you work through your budget. And manager's original transmittal, one potential add was to elevate buildings and grounds position from year-round part-time of 27 hours to full-time. We took another look at this last week, and you could consider, I spoke with staff about this, merging the seasonal parks position with this year-round buildings and grounds position to create a new full-time position. We feel the budget impact would be about $13,000 as opposed to over $40,000 for the other model. Met with our Recreation and Parks Director and Public Works Director to go over this. They're very supportive of this model to get a third full-time employee. Staff thinks in the coming years, working to evolve this division of buildings, grounds, and parks, looking at perhaps a target of 5 full-time employees. And as we get beyond the 3 full-time positions, starts to look at other elements that we contract out, janitorial in some buildings, mowing of cemeteries, so we can start to bring those services in-house to offset adding additional staff in this division over time. So some elements to think about there for you.
That was very creative.
Mm-hmm.
Great move.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So that piece of it. Environmental Reserve Fund, said some comments about this, and Terry McCaig had suggested looking at a $40,000 number last week. So we've run in these scenarios a couple models looking at that. And one element for the board to think about here is you could always include that in your general fund budget, but you also have the option of always assigning your unassigned fund balance outside the budget process. So You could achieve that element with assigning fund balance outside of the budget process, and in turn, your bottom line won't be quite as high because you're not bringing that expense, and you're likely going to offset it with a revenue of fund balance or additional taxes. So mechanically, that's something to think about as you think about bottom line here. You have that available to you every year. It could be something you think about in the future too, if we come in with the surplus local option tax, and we'll get that report in usually August to close out a fiscal year. You could think about assigning some of those funds as we close the books towards the ERF, for example.
Just my thought on that. I know you're on a roll, but I'm afraid of.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Come back.
Yeah, interrupt.
Is that this will take it as it is now, not in the budget. So at any point we want to put it back in the budget, it's a budget add.
Yep.
Right? Where if you put it in the budget, just put back the budget and take something else out or add revenue to it, then next year it's a continuing, it becomes a crapshoot every year as opposed to a continuing budget line item, in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, certainly elements to think about here, and whether you have it in the budget every year or not, you always have that available for assigning your fund balance for different purposes as well here.
So I guess are you saying it would set a precedent?
Yes.
Okay.
Because next year, if we decide we want to put $40,000 in environmental, it would be a $30,000 add to the budget
Yeah.
next year, right? This year, it's a 30,000, 40,000 decrease, which we've applied to other places.
Yep. Okay.
That's-
All right. Yep. Okay.
And then based on money we make on the local options tax, it would be dependent upon whether we put it in or not, correct?
So another element, Community Justice Center funding. We work this as a grant program fund every year, and our budget projection is $195,000 for FY25. Our DOC grant has picked up the vast majority of that over the years, and the town of Williston's made up the difference for the program. So we believe what the grant won't pick up this year is about $72,000. And after we put the original budget together, I've been in communication with Heinsberg and Richmond, who also received services from our Community Justice Center, asking them to consider a contribution towards the program. What I've received from both communities is I anticipate around $20,000 of contributions between the two of them. So to make the town would then pick up the gap there, and that would be more like $52,000. So I had it in at 62 originally, suggesting it's just a dial back of 10,000. We'd certainly make sure the program is funded as needed, but just mechanically, this is the way this could flow in the budget with some additional revenue coming in for the program. And then one of your decision points tonight, as you think through this and potential debt service for some bond projects, we have the town hall parking lot project and the Brick Church fire suppression system project. That will add an initial bond payment in FY25 of interest for at least the parking lot project, and then you can always defer the principal payment a couple of years if you choose. So you could choose to defer that as well. Actually, I put it here for timing of the parking lot. We think that's more of a 2025 construction with permitting. So we could go in the winter bond pool. So a year from now, we'd have an interest payment due in May. Then the first principal payment wouldn't be due till FY26, or we could defer it then too. We also tried to estimate, we feel the Brick Church project could proceed this year. We go to bond sale this summer, we'd have some interest payments due this first year. We could defer the principal if the board would like. So I attached to this some schedules that the bond bank ran for us just to see the financials there. We've been waiting for an estimate on the Brick Church project, and Public Works Director followed up with the engineer doing the work today. It's been delayed a little bit, but I told him, we're crunch time here to figure out if this is going to have a bond article or not in the next week or so. He suggested not to exceed $475,000 for the project. Tells me anticipated it to come in lower next week, but when you're looking for bonding authority, if you choose to go a fully financed route, that would be the ceiling amount as of today, suggesting for that warning. So part of your discussion is deciding, do you want this project to proceed? If so, is your funding structure bond for it fully, bond for it partially, and offset with ARPA, defer? Those are options before you. Depending on the timing of these, you'll have some bill payments due on the debt as well. And I should mention too, we're going to apply for the Downtown Transportation Fund grant for the parking lot project. This is about an $860,000 project. The grants we're going to apply for is $200,000. The town is required to give a 20% match as part of that application, so that's $172,000. If the board were to consider ARPA funds for that match towards that project, we can include that in our application. Certainly, we could also put, if the board wants to bond for this, ask the voters completely at town meeting day, we can put that in our application as well. Just different options available. We're hoping we could get that grant money, but that's not guaranteed, and we wouldn't find out till April. So we'd have to decide what the bonding authority would be there up front and kind of take that approach of what the payments could be, depending on the route you want to go. Related to that too is a decision the board would need to make. Do you want to combine both projects into one bond and one question on the warning, or do you want to separate them out? Town attorney raised the point to me to consider. If you're combining them, you may have, if you receive an unfavorable vote, it may be driven by one project as opposed to the other. Thoughts you have as how you want to warn town meeting here. Another element is, I assured the board during the budget with the fire chief, we have an ambulance that's due for replacement in a couple of years. We're finding the build times for these are extensive, 2 to 3 years at times. I should hear from the town attorney this week. I asked him the question, would it be recommended to get bonding authority now to borrow for the ambulance that wouldn't be done for a few years when it's due to be replaced, but we want to make sure we can put in a purchase order and have the authority to pay for it and borrow the money now. So I'll have that feedback for you this week, but that may be another element you may want to consider for the warning as well. You wanted to give it some thought, just based on where we are right now with some of these timing things. And then memo just kind of goes through, we went through some possible reductions in departments. They're listed here, some capital, some operational. And then finally, we ran these 2 budget scenarios. Scenario 1 mainly had the HR director at an earlier start date. And we chose September 1st for illustration and start discussion in this. And it also did that movement of the ERF intent to assign to fund balance instead. Scenario 2 was, I think it was Terry had raised this last meeting to run HR director at 50% of the year, ERF with $40,000. And just off trying to hit that 9.5% goal, but we were 9.58% there. And then you'll see there's illustrations with the tax rate as well for both of these. And then Shirley ran the numbers of how that would affect a median homeowner, both overall for the year and per month, and how that deviates between the manager's budget transmitted in December and these 2 scenarios. But this is your workspace to decide how you want to land on this. Just timeline wise, you have till I think the 28th or so is the window where town meeting can start being warned. So should the board reach a point tonight where you reach consensus on these main elements of the warning, staff can finalize that and bring it to you next week in terms of all the legal motions you need to make for budget and capital budget, and warning and bond articles. But you also have the following week on the 23rd if there's any additional work to complete next week and to get these legal requirements done. So that's where we are. Shirley set up a spreadsheet with all of this that we can put on the screen to help you see the numbers in real time if you'd like, as we're talking expense bottom lines and wrangling on the revenue side of things as well. So turn to the chair. How do you like to approach this discussion?
Well, we have 2, I'd say, chef's choice scenario 1, scenario 2, but then we can also go a la carte. I guess I'd like to hear or have everybody hear what everybody's preferences are. I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do this, but we're talking about a budget that's going to increase by at least 9.5%. So we should be sure about everything. What is the consensus of the board? Do we? Shirley, do you have it so that we could go and say, oh, strike that. Now what is it? Strike that now.
I do.
All right.
I love that. It's my favorite when we can do that.
Yeah.
Shirley, did you join the Zoom meeting? I just need you to join the Zoom.
Nope, I did not.
So we can make it appear. on
Gene,
the
you had your own spreadsheet. Is this going to be a problem?
Shirley and I are in sync on our spreadsheets. was ARPA's pretty cheap.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. My fault.
Could we potentially tick off some of the, I mean, some of the items are the same across, I mean, primarily the detective being 50% of the fiscal year. Would it make sense to, come to some sort of informal consensus? Like, is that an item we'd like to leave in the budget? And then kind of go through the other pieces, how we feel about the human resources piece. We want it to be 50% or 83%. Do we want it in there at all? All of that, and kind of go through item by item.
Yeah, that sounds.
Start with the easy ones, that's a good idea.
So which one's easy?
Police detective.
Okay.
It was my understanding, kind of from the last meeting, that we all kind of were in agreement that that was the way to go, that we needed, or that adding a police detective position was the way to go. Yes. I don't know. Looking at me. But I do think, I think that adding it in the 50%, which would, kind of hard to believe that we're talking about a year from now, essentially. But I do think that makes sense in terms of,
Just went out, I'm gonna come back in here for some reason.
in terms of financially for our town, so.
What are people's thoughts on that? If the choice is
Well, I have to
between
enter a- I don't normally. do that when I log
50%
in.
or
I sent you
hiring
documentation.
forthwith or not hiring at all,
You should get
what are your thoughts?
That's
Police detective?
Yeah, police
I
detective.
think we need it.
Get out of here.
Right now, we're just going round and round.
Yeah, and I think, I would like to have it the whole year, but I think realistically, we can better afford it with a half a year, and it's probably more likely we already have a lieutenant to replace, so bringing another one on half makes sense to me.
Yep. Okay. Terry?
Oh, it's on my other screen, that's why.
And also to make it clear that the intent to fund the next year that fund $40,000 from the general, which brings it down on the surplus fund.
Okay. But in terms of the police detective, half a year, we start the person halfway through the year? Okay. Okay. And Terry's other point, he had a number of other points, but one of them was the human resources director at 83%. Okay. What are people's thoughts on that?
Maybe just confusing things, Shirley, but when I was asking about if we could reduce overtime in the finance department with the HR director, you said, well, she's mostly taking work off of Aaron's desk. So if we did 50%, could she work with Aaron while you're finishing up the budget? And 'cause it seems like the reason we want to go to 83% is so that, because finance is too busy to train somebody in January.
Really, to have them here before open enrollment process starts?
That's a different issue.
Yeah,
That's true.
That's a lot of time,
I didn't
Yeah.
mention that point.
yeah.
That makes more sense to me.
Yeah, and we probably have, myself would spend a lot of time with them with onboarding a new senior staff member. So I'll certainly make anything work, but as similar this time of year becomes busy with the budget, September 1st, October 1st, I think, as you decide where you want to land here, our thought would be sometime in the fall would be helpful, but tough decisions to make here.
When open enrollment's November for the town?
Yeah, early November.
Yeah.
This year we were later because changing plans, but yeah.
Is it too much to say, what would be the scenario if we started them October 1st and it was like, I know that's that's splitting hairs there, but is that reasonable, or is that an onboarding enough process before November 1st, or?
We'd be fine with October 1st.
I mean, I know that's not a huge savings there, but what would that be, like
About $11,000.
Yeah.
11,000? So that's not insignificant.
Getting closer to the 9.6.
There you go.
9.5, like, we-
Uh,
Okay, so Eric, I'd make these changes as we're going along, except for I can't see the spreadsheet on my screen.
Oh.
I was trying to, Scott, but see, I can't see it. I can't click on it to see it on my computer.
Are you sharing your screen, Cheryl?
I am.
Huh.
So it's, not quite sure what it's doing. I don't, yeah. And maybe it's because I'm in ConnectWise, because that's, now I can, thank you.
I just clicked on something like that.
Okay. Figure, yeah. How's that? Bigger?
If you could, maybe a little bit.
Okay.
per my earlier conversation about the reading glasses.
So what I've, in this spreadsheet, here's the grand list that we're using. And then these are FY24 numbers, tax rate, property taxes, and total expenses. So I can do comparisons and rate increases. So the 15,198 is the number from the original December budget that was proposed. So listening to your conversation, can I just walk through these things? It sounded like, yes, no, you're good. This is taking the 27-hour week, permanent part-time buildings and grounds person, plus we had the 30 hours a week for 36 weeks parks person, seasonal. We combined those together to make a full-time buildings and grounds person, and that's an additional 13,000.
Yeah,
And what's driving that is the insurance.
there was consensus on that, yes.
So I'm gonna leave that one in. PD detective is half a year. So we're gonna change this. So I'm gonna do this a little bit. It's gonna say like $11,000 a year. Or a month, I'm sorry. Times. Does that look right? So,
I think you should be probably 96 or so. That's my guess.
11,000 times 9. Oh, you know what, Eric, so I was gonna explain the rest. So you can't see it because it's too small, but whenever this person starts, we need a new computer for them, and that's about $3,000 for computer monitors, etc. Plus, we need to have a desk for them and just general office supplies. So there is like $7,000 in here, no matter when the office supplies, the telephone, the postage, those things would decrease. But if there's start October 1st, it's really not going to be much different. So that is wages, benefits, and the startup expenses of a new employee. Debt service. So that is, okay, so I'm gonna, way over here to the side, I made a little note, because as Eric said, we got a new update for the fire suppression system in the old brick church. And so I recalculated the debt service for that project at $475,000. So that would be like $2,500 more in FY25. So this 22,000 represents currently 400,000 debt for $13,400 a year, and the $900 for the parking lot, and that debt service is like $9,200 a year. So,
If we put that on a bond, we take that away, correct?
what'd you say?
If we put that on a bond and the town votes on it, we would take that away?
No, that's the interest on the bond that would be due prior to June 30th of 25.
Oh, in the bond?
Yeah.
Our only decision point here would be if we used ARPA funding potentially to reduce the amount that we would have to bond. And then that number would be lower if we were going to use ARPA funding for part of the,
So tell me again what the total amounts were the bond assumption?
Yep. So do you want a number with the 475? That's not in here if I add it to this.
Well, what do you have in there? For you have
For
300?
what I have in there for now is 400,000 for the Old Brick Church.
Yep.
And that's $13,430.
Yep.
And then 900,000 for the parking lot, and that's $9,200.
and that 900,000 could potentially be 700,000 if we got the grant, but
And
we don't know.
500,000 if we also use ARPA money,
Right.
right?
Right.
So that's probably, it's the right thing to do. It's a question of, could be just skinny that number down. Assuming
Right,
400 for the Old Brick Church and 500 for the parking lot.
right.
So that's what I would probably do, because, I mean, we're not that good. If we're off by $8,000, we'll find a way to cover it somehow.
So, makes sense?
Yeah, can you say that one more time, Gene?
So if you just redid the interest payment to be 400 for the Old Brick Church and 500 for the parking lot, which would assume yes on the grant and yes on the ARPA funds, 172, whatever.
So you do 75,000 ARPA on the Old Brick Church, and then you do 200,000 ARPA, assuming we get the grant on the parking lot. Is that what you're saying, Jean?
No, I just thought all of the Old Brick Church on the bond. I think it's
Yeah.
going to be an easy sell in this community.
Yep.
We'll tell them if they don't vote yes, we're putting the cell tower in. Kidding. And then the parking lot, you said 900, and if we assume 200 out of the grant and for rounding, 172 out of ARPA, but, you know, by just doing rounding, I said no, 200. That would leave you about 500 bond for the parking lot.
I might suggest you may want to put the bond number, assuming we don't get the grant funding. So that's a fallback if you don't have the.
Yeah, but if you're off by $4,000, you know, I mean,
But for the parking lot, it would be off 200,000.
but what's the interest on 200,000?
Oh, I see. Oh, in terms of, I thought you were talking about what to put on the
Oh,
warrant.
no, warning, that's a whole different.
Okay.
That's what
I follow you.
If you want to be consistent, we can do that's something else elsewhere. I just think that's a,
Yep, I follow you now in terms of the interest calculation. So you got that? You have that, Shirley?
So I don't have it in here because I have to go back and calculate.
but it would probably take a
Yeah.
third
So
of it,
right now-
something, say $5,000.
Yeah.
But
So right now, the Old Brick Church is in here at 400,000 anyway.
Yep.
Okay.
So, actually, look, if we can stop and ask, is there consensus on that?
I mean, that feels right to me. I mean, I think
Yeah.
the parking lot's important for us to do, but I do, and, you know, in my, you know, ARPA calculations, that is a project that I did envision us partially funding. And so I feel comfortable with putting money towards that, but I agree with Jean. I do think that, you know, people feel strongly about the Old Brick Church, and I think that they would
Support.
want to protect it in case of emergency.
I agree.
And
Okay.
Terry, you okay with all that?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay, fire capital, I'm assuming we have no problems with reducing funds.
And that's the server replacement. It's assuming it will go to a cloud system, so we wouldn't need a savings allocation. So that's what Chief said to me.
The salt budget was erroneously reduced by $5,000, and Bruce requested that we bring it back up to the 145,000 from 140. finance department wages. That was reducing one person's overtime and reallocating the percentage of another individual's time to the casualty insurance. Eric and I we looked at that. And as he spoke before, we had like a 25% increase because of the undervaluation of our buildings. So we just looked at an average and took out that anomaly number, and so we were able to decrease it by $5,000. Eric talked about the Community Justice Center already. That will just be decreased the town's portion of funding the rest of the program.
And so that number though is, as we said, the number, that could be another 10,000 less than that even,
Yeah, so I was gonna-
potentially, right?
It's a 10 and not 20.
I hedged when I put the budget together and put the town's funding at 62 instead of 72, hoping we would get some.
Yeah.
And knowing in the weeks that after I transmit the original budget, we'd have more of the story. So now we know we need to fund 72,000. We should get 20 from the other towns. That leaves 52 for Wilson to pick up.
So could we reduce up or take another $10,000 off? I mean, if because you put $10,000 in there, assuming that's what the towns were going to give us, but they're going to give us 20 potentially.
So in the original budget transmittal, Eric, or it should have been 72,000,
Yeah.
but Eric.
Oh, I see. Okay. Okay. All right. I did not wrap my head around that. Got it. Okay. All right. That's trying to give us more.
You.
We're in the same conversation.
Yep. Okay. All right.
And just remind me, we had some folks from the Community Justice Board.
Yeah.
Right
Yep.
term for that, come in, and do we think we've addressed their concerns?
I'll be following up with them. I know they had a discussion about staff compensation, and I've told them I tend to have those discussions with the employees directly.
I apologize, by the way, I had some oral surgery yesterday, so I have an appliance in my mouth, so if I'm slurring,
You're great.
You're not.
can't
Yeah.
understand me, just ask again, I'm happy to.
We can do a horizontal gaze and nystagmus on you to see
Yeah.
alcohol.
PD capital, a reduction of 3,500. Public Works, Eric, you'll have to speak to that one because I didn't see where Bruce was taking that from.
Yeah, that was a reduction, I think 1,000 from building maintenance and 5,000 from half paving. Bruce felt we were ahead in that, and our paving contract could cover as needed, so he was comfortable reducing that line.
Offsets our salt.
Yeah, there's our salt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the single audit fees, actually Eric caught this one. We thought the Burlington Beer Company, we've told them if we have a single audit because of the grant that needs to pass through the town, that they were responsible for it. And I believe it's in the agreements that are in draft. So chances are the town by itself will not have enough federal funds, all depending on, how much ARPA gets spent. But typically the town by itself would not go over 750,000. So in the end, they'll pay for the single audit and we won't have to. Yeah, I saw that too.
Thank you.
We're waiting.
Sorry, it wasn't just me.
Yeah.
Need to add 30,000 at this point.
Yep, that's what I was just going to say.
Start discussion.
Okay. So 15,353 are revised operating expenses. So 125,000, and I'm clicking on the screen so you can see where I'm at, is our increase from the original budget transmitted in December, which is a 9.84% increase in expenses. Todd did come up with an additional 5,000 in recreation revenue, which means 120,000. So in this model, now I'm jumping down to the FY23 property tax revenue. The original amount transmitted with the 7,985,000. In this model, I'm just taking the whole 120,000 and saying that's property taxes. So 8,105,11 would be generated in property taxes. The property tax rate would be 0.3372, 12.19% increase.
Sorry.
Go right ahead.
One other item, if Terry mentioned it, if the intent for that additional 30,000 for the ERF is to use fund balance, we could reflect that as a revenue and not a property tax revenue as you think about how to balance here as you look at this.
We didn't go through each line item and get consensus, but I didn't think any of that was controversial. Is everybody good with that?
So so now we're at 9.8% if we leave the environmental fund money in the budget.
Correct.
And then if we did it this way, we could increase do you have the offsetting increase in the fund balance application?
How much do you want to fund the 30,000 with fund balance?
That's the intent. I just don't know if it's gonna, I think the discussion is it in the budget we're doing it or outside the budget we're doing it, right?
Right. So if you do it inside the budget, yeah, surely we just add it to this. You could make that 5,000, 30,000, however you want to do it, Shirley. Right. You would allocate it as the expense within the budget. If you did it outside the budget, we would remove that extra $30,000 expense from the budget. And then, the board could consider a motion after you adopt the budget for the warning. Your next motion is to consider allocating $30,000 of the unassigned fund balance to the ERF. That same meeting if you wanted to.
I find that tempting. I know the idea is that, if we do that, then in the following year, then, the environmental reserve fund was only funded for $10,000 in last year's budget. So, what's to say that we're not going to just keep doing that? But I guess, we're looking at a over 12% property tax increase right now.
Well, it won't affect the property taxes if you take it out of both the revenue and the expense.
Right.
The only thing it's going to affect is the 9.8 and whether or not you are having the size of your allocation that's in your budget, in your public budget.
Well, why wouldn't taking $30,000 out affect the
You're
property
also going
tax?
to take it out of your revenue.
Yeah, you won't need
it's
to
in the
raise
revenue?
that. You won't need to raise that in taxes. You'll pull it from another pool of money that's already
Okay.
there, so you won't need to raise that in taxes.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
So right here, Ted, I just put minus 30,000. So I'm saying we're only
I didn't
raising
catch that.
90,000 in property taxes. Or alternately, I just take it out of here and we're back to 120,000 out of property taxes.
I don't know. I defer to those of you who have more experience on whether it matters having it as a line item allocation in your budget or not. Seems to me it would, but that's not something I can really judge well. As someone who's not in the select board, if I pick up the budget and look at it, I'm going to see it went from 40 to 10.
Or you compromise with
Hmm?
adding part of it, say
We've already
25,000. Right, and
compromised
then
a
do the
bit.
rest with
They
fund
want-
balance?
They want 150.
Yeah.
Well, the Conservation Commission folks are going to know that we gave them more than the original 10. I mean, I'm not sure they're going to be upset that it came from the reserve fund versus,
I don't have any experience of this, so.
I don't think it's a big issue. It just,
How about Terry? Terry, what do you think?
yep.
So-
Go ahead.
Do you want to try?
No, you're good.
So we're discussing whether or not the $30,000 for the environmental fund should be a budget line item offset with more fund balance application, or not have it in the budget and just do it outside the budget, the same 30,000, but outside the budget process. And I just don't know if that matters.
So I thought that you need to be transparent, so we should indicate that we're going to take 30,000 from the fund to the budget.
That's kind of where I'm parked.
All right, okay. Other people feel that way?
It's fine with me.
Okay.
I mean, the only difference is it looks like a 9.8% expense increase instead of a 9.65%
30, yeah.
increase,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
still under 10.
Okay. I think I've lost track. Where does that leave us for our decision points then?
Get to 90. I think those,
That was
in
it.
terms of the scenario, you've gone down the list there. So just to recap, you've funded the buildings and grounds, parks position, the detective for half a year, the HR director with an October 1 start date. Put in a number for the bonds based on a little bit lower of the bond amounts. We took about 5,000 off there. Then you've left in staff's I'll call them more miscellaneous as we went through the budget one last time, and then you've added in 30,000 to the ERF to the general fund expense, and you've offset that with the use of additional $30,000 of fund balance towards as a revenue for that added expense.
And 90,000 increase in property tax revenue.
From the first pass. 90,000 difference from the, what?
So our changes.
No,
I'm
the
looking at-
changes-
We're
changes came to-
125, so 5 is going to come from additional revenue. 30 is going to come from fund balance, because we're going to fund the ERF with fund balance in the budget. And then 90 to come from property taxes, or you could say.
Okay, let's go back to that. That's, I just want to make sure that.
Yeah,
Yep, the change from what was transmitted to you in December is
Is now
$90,000 additional expenses. If you scroll down a little bit, surely that shows the calculator. If you raise that 90 through
Yeah.
property taxes, and if you won't mind
But
just
would like to,
go over that way a little bit.
Yep, so it's this 118 a year, 990 per month number.
Yep.
That is.
Ted, do you intend to circle back to our audience here? for
Yeah.
Their question? Okay.
Yeah.
Before we get too far into revenue applications.
Yep. So, yeah, actually, gentlemen, you've been sitting very patiently and listening, and I'm sure it's been fascinating. I think that there's a difficulty here in this, that we are in the middle of negotiations, and you're actually negotiating with the select board. Eric is the manager, but he's, the contract would be approved or disapproved by the select board, not the town manager. But that being said, if the number is $40,000 or $50,000, that, my experience on the board is that's money that would be able to be found. I hesitate to say that because it'd be great to have you leaving thinking that we just don't have the money. But I think we'd be able to find it. I know that we would. So in terms of the budgeting process, it's not, that amount is not going to tie in to whether the budget works overall or not, because it can be absorbed without stealing from other people too much or at all. So, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that. But
Well, it's a little more generous than I would say, assuming it looks like if we all settle in the next 3 months, we still have a pretty good leeway. Maybe that HR director doesn't start till January.
Yeah.
Maybe another open position stays open for 6 weeks instead of getting filled immediately, but there's a little runway to adjust if we have to, given that it would be a year.
Or local options taxes are higher, or we use, the same fund balance we're using, they're, yeah. So it may not be a line item in this budget, but, if it's differentiates from what is in the budget, yeah.
yeah,
We certainly do appreciate you circling back around to us to kind of address.
he's a tyrant.
No, he's doing a fantastic job, like really making this sound great. We appreciate you circling back to us to talk about that. And by no means are we, I guess I just really want to say that we do appreciate you coming back around to this topic, which is probably not easy and a little surprising to see us here tonight. And by no means are we trying to like impose our presence.
No.
You know, I think,
And you have not, you're not doing anything untoward whatsoever, so.
yeah, we really just wanted to address the, you know, just what we've seen. We've been watching the meetings, and, you know, I know the town has a bigger job than just worrying about the fire department. But it, you know, because we're in this process, we wanted just to voice the opinion and make sure that no one who's trying to get as much as the slice of the pie right now is going to miss out on something because we're right in the middle of it.
Yep. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, and you know, negotiations are hard. As a lawyer, I've always hated them, and I don't do them that much with my current job, but to the degree that I do, I still hate them. So my heart goes out to you.
It's a positive outlook for the future.
Well, it doesn't mean the process has to lead to injustice. It's just that it's a difficult process.
We agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, ultimately, this is about making sure that we can proceed in good faith with each other. So I think, you know, circling back to us and addressing some of those concerns, one of the questions we were planning to ask is, depending on how things go in negotiations, you know, I know adding 50,000 to this is going to blow up the number. So it's probably not going to happen, right? But the money would have to come from somewhere. So we just have to understand that there's a process, there's a way, a mechanism for that to happen in order to really actually proceed,
Yep.
You know, with that trust on both sides.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Great.
I appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has nothing to do with anything, but I want to share, when the camera was showing Greta and the big screen was on, there were a whole bunch of red lights behind her from the window.
I saw that. I was wondering what that was, but I
kept
didn't want to
thinking,
turn around.
Why aren't the firefighters running out? There must be some massive problem out there, and I should think, it turns out it's the Christmas tree. Right.
Yes.
So,
Oh.
anyway,
I'm gonna look at it.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's-
We do want to, we'll at least acknowledge we do have a shift working hard tonight through the storm. So
Yeah.
we appreciate what those guys are doing. A lot of them would have liked to have been here, but I do believe there was an incident right at the start of the meeting as well. We have several other members of the department are off serving in other communities tonight as well. So while it's just myself and Jeremy here, by no means is it anemic showing.
Yeah.
They're just doing their duty elsewhere.
Sure, absolutely. Yep, yep. Yeah, and it's very much appreciated.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
I'll let everyone-
My daughter on Christmas Eve came over to the department with a tertier, a French Canadian meat pie, and she said that whichever firefighter she rang on the door, like sprinted down the stairs and grabbed the food and was very appreciative. And I think I've said this before, but she did the same thing for the police department, and they were slightly suspicious.
So sounds like they're gonna have a detective. So
Thank you again very much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Safely tonight.
Yeah, thank you.
Stay safe tonight.
Yeah.
And warm.
I don't know what it's gonna be like when we get outside.
I think if you wait till 10 o'clock, it'll be raining. It'll be easy to get home.
So does that bring us to where we could make a motion?
I'd suggest staff gives everything a final look
Okay.
and brings it back to you next week.
Maybe we can have a straw poll that we all agree on the numbers that we're looking at.
Okay, let's
Now,
do
did we
that.
go through I mean, was there a question about applying more fund balance or anything? Are we comfortable with the revenue side of it? I kind of cut us off before we finished that conversation.
I think we left it on using more fund balance gives me agita. I think we're at that 16%, and to me, that feels like it's lower than we've been. I know that we can go in, it's recommended between 10 and 20, but typically we've been at the higher point of that because we rely so heavily on local options tax. For for me personally, I feel as just thinking about it, you know, because that number is so variable and I would prefer a higher fund balance. So I would be hesitant to use additional because of the what if. But
I made a note next week when we just confirm these numbers, we'll give you an update to the fund balance.
okay.
Okay.
I don't disagree, I really don't, but just out of curiosity, if you wanted to get to a single digit tax rate increase, how much more would we have to apply?
Single rate, oh, how
I think it
much
actually
more?
probably have that on here somewhere, don't you?
I'm not sure we calculated that is.
You could, that 30 reduction you have, Shirley, you could bump that up and just
See what
like,
happens.
Just see what happens to the 10.53. Oh, sorry, it's applied to the bottom, so we're at.
Yeah, it's applied to the bottom, so hold on. I'm just guessing there. What did you want it to be at, Jane?
10%, 9.9%.
Okay,
So we're line 41 is essentially the E41 is the increase. So that first percentage, Shirley, that is the December transmittal, the 10.53.
correct,
Right.
yep.
It wouldn't blow it. Go ahead. Still going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
still
that goes
going.
back to where we
Greta's starting to shake.
Yeah.
Oops. Okay, must
Whoa,
have
that
been
would
an
do it.
extra zero.
Extra zero.
I'm definitely not comfortable. with
Well,
That would eliminate it.
So it'd be like an extra over 100.
yeah. Keep going.
Yeah, each cent's about 215.
That's, I thought we'd see.
160,000 more to get to 9.98.
You can put it back to 30 then. I'm curious.
One thing we've looked at the last couple of years is kind of that per month cost for a median homeowner. So that expression, I think that's 990. Looking at it that way.
I didn't put one from this year in here, so sorry.
Yeah, so that's at the second cluster, right? Line 41. So the change under this model is 100 for a median home, which is $300,000 assessment, 118.81 for the year, or 990 per month.
Well, the school board's getting much better, much worse news than this tonight, so I don't think we're going to be the headline story.
Yep. Okay.
Actually, I do have a question for you in our email of questions.
Yeah.
So did you see that the last part you said, providing information about education taxes? And I responded by saying I took the current letter that we got and increased it by 5% based on the fact that school, and maybe that's not right, the school increase going to be a 5% cap.
It's 5% cap for CLA, which is going to be 18%.
Okay, okay. So we're gonna find, so maybe Jean, we can,
We'll squeeze out another couple thousand before next week.
yeah, I'm just thinking that then if that's the case, then our education admin fee will go up.
Right.
So maybe we can, if you wanna,
We'll circle back.
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so yeah, with that, the town as the agent to collect all taxes gets a fee for doing that. It's based on the amount of education tax the town collects in proportion.
So I'm sorry for being thick-headed, but where do we leave this? It sounds like we have a revenue, an expense number for the budget. Revenue side, it's a question of reserve fund at this point. Is that about right? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Do a right. Current calculation of the fund balance to see where we are.
yeah, so is that something we
Well-
should wait until next week when we have that number?
And we'll true up the interest number, and then Jean, maybe we can work to see
If
if
it's,
we have 80,000 in the budget for the education
yeah,
assistant.
it's probably not going to be a material change.
Okay, so we won't worry about it.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
what we'll do is we typically like just double check all the expense numbers one last time. So in your warning, you have a bottom line to raise and then a bottom line expenses and then the amount to raise with taxes. So if the board wants to look at the taxes one last time next week, that's the revenue question. I can put in the draft warning, these numbers tonight, and if there's a discussion on a change there after you have some time to think about it some more, we can easily change it and re-sign the warning. Post it.
I guess the only other number we should reach out, I haven't seen anything from the county tax final.
I haven't seen any.
Yeah, so I'll make a note to reach out to up there.
That's all staff needs tonight. If there's no further questions from the board.
Okay, great. Next agenda item, the ARPA funds discussion.
So a question just to confirm, I know the board was going down this road last week, but certainly you'll have to also approve the capital plan and budget at your meeting next week. So having consensus about what you want to fund from that capital budget through ARPA will be important. And kind of how I see a sequence of approvals for the board on the capital budget, given these different revenue elements, would be a motion to adopt the capital plan and budget, then a motion to consider utilizing the unassigned fund balance to fill that part of the capital budget, and then a motion to use ARPA funds as of a memo transmitted by the manager to allocate those towards capital budget projects. Because we keep treating ARPA as its own fund, that money's available right away. We don't necessarily have to wait till the new fiscal year to spend it. So for example, if you fund the, say the community center project phase 2, we could engage and work to move that along this winter or the spring. We'll need to wait till July because those funds are available now. I put that all in the capital budget as a way to discuss the revenue a little easier in that framework than stuff. That's how to suggest for a process, but feedback tonight would just be helpful to see, make sure there's consensus on what projects are going to be funded in that capital, especially it's the equipment stuff, and then just need some feedback on the ARPA towards the bond items so we can prep the bond resolutions with the attorney this week as well. And then you could hold off on some of these other decisions till February for ARPA funds. I know there's a lot I threw at you with the TIF last week, and chatting with Ted, we're going to plan to have probably assemble a panel of communities who have worked with TIFs to bring to the board, probably hopefully in February, to help have you opportunity to ask questions. So there's TIF practitioners who you can, from other colleagues, to help you think about that component as well.
But tonight, are you really just asking what we kicked around last week, which was on this capital page 9, to confirm that our decision's on that?
Yeah, that, and certainly any way the board wants to go with it with ARPA tonight, but it would be helpful for staff to just understand on that page 9 if there's any removals. I know the body cams was one that was, I think that might have been the only one that was brought up last week.
Yeah, what I had just checked off was the body cams we took out. So it was really just kind of down to the debt. I had question marks on the debt. So the brick church and the town hall parking lot were the ones that we kind of left open.
Everybody, it's the capital part of the budget. Yeah,
It starts over, so it's over halfway through and on page 9.
the second page 9, like.
Or buildings.
Didn't one
I
bind.
had trouble finding it last week.
If you,
I'm an
if you're
idiot.
past buildings, you went too far. Okay. Okay. So the police cams,
That was the one that, well, Greta had kind of said we shouldn't be using ARPA funds for things that are not one time, and this was a lease, and so kind of kicked around taking those out, which Eric didn't flip out on, so I thought that would be okay.
I could take an opportunity for this item, certainly it's something we'd recommend for the department. They're the only department in Chittenden County, I believe, that doesn't have body cams that protects the officer and people they're engaging with to document it.
Yep.
And then the less lethal use of force using tasers is certainly a use of fourth option for the department to consider moving forward. So I certainly recommend moving forward with this, but given where we were with the money, with $30,000 being another significant investment, I landed on ARPA to start the discussion.
Yeah, it feels like a rock and a hard place because I do feel like it's imperative that our police force has these body cams. But then, I support them having them either way. So it's a matter of if it becomes another budget item or if it becomes an ARPA expense for this year with the knowledge that we're kind of breaking our, unspoken rule of funding something that's an ongoing expense. So. Given, as tough as, we're pulling 11,000 1 month of, the position versus, this and that. I'm inclined to say, let's break our own rule and use the ARPA funding.
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little uncomfortable with the whole process of funding things now or mid-year and binding our hands for next year, because who knows what next year will look like, right? It could be a disaster, and then we've already tied ourselves hands. We have to cut a position because we've committed to body cams. So my preference would always be, if you're going to have an ongoing expense, you have the discussion, you prioritize your budget. If this would be because I was running into that with the rec zone building, which was not in this year's budget. But we have it, our hands are tied, it's in next year's budget, and that's half a position. So, I really prefer not to slide things in because it's free money and then kick the can down the road. I agree with you, I think it's something we should have, but it has to be a prioritized discussion on the budget, not free money and we'll deal with it later.
Is there any way that the body cam would protect us for the future and with if something happens, protect a police officer?
Well, I think that's the idea. And what Chief said when he was here is that it protects not only the officers, but also the citizens, that it's really, but we are the only ones that don't have it. So I think like I said, I think it's imperative that we, as a town, provide these for our, our folks. I'm wondering if there's a capital expense that we could fund through ARPA for this year and then put this into the budget instead, if that would,
Right.
We looked, to
Yeah.
be honest,
Scrubbed.
same aspiration. I recognize this puts the board in a tough spot. Where I landed, I prioritized all the equipment replacements with escalating costs here. It's always this, there's going to be a trade-off either way here without increasing the bottom line. We could, for like the police cruiser replacement, we could pump more into ARPA for next year there, but we know we're going to have more and more operating costs for police cruisers. So I'm wary of relying too much outside of just the operating budget on these equipment replacements. I must have gone back and forth on this a dozen times as we put this together too.
Is there anything like in IT that we could defer, or, programming that we do if we end up with more revenue, but we don't put it in the budget? There must be some creative way to solve this problem.
We can take another pass at it this week. Probably give the due diligence. I just don't want to try to figure it out on the fly here too much. We can take some time to look at it and see if we have some options we can present to the board on
I mean,
this.
we do have $400,000 of equipment costs. We could, it's gotta be something we can find.
If we can't, though, I'm inclined to break our rule and use ARPA funds on it. I think the cameras are absolutely critical for everybody. I think citizens have a greater confidence in law enforcement when there is a camera, and law enforcement has greater confidence in their job because they know that if a falsehood is made about their conduct, that it can be disproved. So it's keeps everybody that much safer, and again, this budget is not as bad as the recession after 9/11 and the things that were going on there, but it's a similarly difficult, and it's at that time we had to make decisions that were kind of one-offs, and we were hoping that the next year would be better, and it was. I'm not one to not plan for worst case scenarios. I'm a big worst case scenario person. But I think maybe on things like that, we can take a gamble.
If we put the 30,000 in the budget, does it knock us over 10%? Or are we just at 9.9 instead of 9.8?
Let's see. Let me just pull that back up.
I agree with Ted.
I mean, I don't want anybody to think, I don't think these are imperative. It's just that
Oh, yeah.
it shouldn't be you save something that's imperative to add at the last minute. There's lots of stuff in this budget.
So that brings us to 10.06.
There's your challenge, Eric. Keep it under 10.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it, now I always look at something like building contingency fund for $5,000. It's good to build up those contingency funds, but ultimately if we had something break, we would just need to replace it too, whether it's in the fund or not. So that'll likely look there first. Maybe we can siphon a little bit off somewhere else. So I can do something similar if the board would like, just run a couple options just to give you something to consider next week.
That would be
here.
helpful.
That's all.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll review some of the comments from your questions.
Go back and figure out that revenue thing.
So where else do we need to focus on ARPA?
The question of the bonds and what, if any, to offset with, or to utilize ARPA funds for the total project versus debt.
Well, so we talked, I think we kind of came to consensus, right, of using 200,000 from ARPA for the parking lot and then not using any ARPA for the brick church.
Yeah. That was my understanding.
That was my understanding too.
Okay.
Terry, you okay with that?
Hey, Terry, can you hear us?
Maybe we lost power.
Mr. Chair, I think that's a good solution.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I agree.
And to your point, Eric, we would have to warn write the warning, assuming we don't get that $200,000 grant, but if we got it, it would be lower.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, well, we go to bond sale. Yeah.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have to sell as many bonds. So let's see if it's $860,000 project, rounded up to $900,000, and we say we get 200 of that from a grant. You may want bonding authority up to 700,000, and then just to give yourself a little space here.
Plus 400. Well, the other bond would be 400.
Yeah, we probably, depending on when we get the number, they suggested doing a authority up to 475, and understanding the number will likely come in, maybe it's 450, but engineers suggesting that they was 475 in bonding authority.
So consensus.
Yep.
All right. Okay.
And separate bond articles.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, my only concern is that you have people picking one and picking their favorite child, right?
Yeah.
So people are choosing which one they want and which one they don't want, as opposed to we want them both. So that's the gamble, but if the number's gonna be over $1 million, I think we split it.
Yeah. I would split it anyway, I think, just because it's direct democracy, that people get to choose which one the town spends their money on. And also, I suspect that both bonds will pass. I don't know that. This year, I'm less certain than I have been. I'm not even sure this budget's going to pass. But each project will have its different constituencies. The parking lot does have environmental overtones to it. So anyway, I would recommend both the separate bonds for each.
That covers what we need.
Okay.
All these moving pieces. It's always this time of year, right?
Yeah.
All these pieces that come together.
So the plan then, just so for my knowledge, will be to discuss the remainder after after we pass the budget kind of discussions, to then really assign the rest of the ARPA funding.
Yep, up to the board. Ted and I had talked about getting some folks for that TIF discussion. However you want to approach it.
And then the rest of it,
Yeah.
we just gotta decide.
So I feel like we just need like a meeting with a 7:30 start time, for this item to be on at 7:30 and not 8:30 or 8:45, because I feel like it's a long discussion.
Yeah, I agree.
Put it early in the agenda.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bretta with
True.
the same kind of spreadsheet, like if you.
I would love it. I would love it. Yes. Mm-hmm. That would be great. Yeah.
Okay. So I believe that takes us to the next item on the agenda, which would be the draft town meeting warning.
Covered most of it. So for Mike and Jean, typically we'll transmit a draft warning to the board as we're getting close here. So I've kept everything the same as last year. We went back to an in-person town meeting in the auditorium after being over Zoom for a couple years. Typically, a couple floor articles, which are moderator, due dates for taxes, accept the annual report, any other business. And then really the meeting's adjourned until Australian balloting the next day, but while everyone's there, the manager will do a walkthrough of the budget articles, the bond articles, leave it open to any questions from the audience on these topics. Then typically the school district will provide a budget presentation as well after that. The town clerk, Sarah Mason's prepared the terms up, most of the down articles here. So I worked with Sarah to double check that from her office. So really the articles, the town-based Article 5 will be this budget article. We'll plug in the bottom line expenses, the amount to raise by taxes. And then I'll work with the town attorney to get the language for these two separate bond items put together. Then there's still the question of that ambulance bonding authority for the future order, which I should have clarity on this week as well. There is a deadline, and I think in a week or two, for petitioned articles. If 5% of voters submit a petition for an article for the ballot, and it's meets the qualifications that the board would have to put it on the warning. I'm not aware of anything that's come in yet, or any discussion about something like that. Then this leaves the question: are there any other articles the board wants to consider for its warning as well?
Okay.
And I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood, but there's gonna be more discussion on the ARPA funds?
Yes.
Next week. And then after that too, I mean, we were not exhausting all of the ARPA funds through the budget, so we'll have decisions to make after budget season pretty quickly, actually, to decide how to allocate the rest of that money. So we're not going to be approving this tonight, obviously, because
No,
there's
just
a lot of blanks in it.
yeah. Just seeking feedback, from the board. Is there any other articles you want to have on the warning here? And then, I'd endeavor to, we'll have the bond language next week. The board will make some final decisions here on the budget bottom line. Something could potentially change as we look at the body camera question. That could change the number slightly. So, even if what could happen next week is the numbers change slightly after a little bit of work. I could have this draft warning. The board could adopt it subject to final changes. Then I'll make those changes and just have the board members, stop by to sign it in town hall, or a week after that, we'll get it posted. So we've done that in the past or if the board needs one more meeting just to come in and pass a few motions here to get things ready, we can, it's at your discretion, how you want the process to play out the next couple of weeks here. But
Okay.
I think, a lot of good work tonight from the board. I think staff's got great feedback on direction to just finalize most of this here.
Eric, on the town warning, we talked about it tonight with the ambulance, because of the bill time and the contract time. Is that gonna go in the warning? Because
The town attorney will be providing his opinion to me this week, so the board will get that this week as well to think about for next week.
okay.
So it'll be the third bond item, though.
Yep.
Now, does this necessarily kick the library and the community center to next year, or we'd also have an option like a November bond if we wanted to, right, this year?
Likely you'd have a November option. It will just really depend on how the work progresses and understanding, thinking kind of in the library's case, kind of what the timeline looks like from to get that designed and what that cost looks like. I can get a better sense on that. It sounds like the formal action to allocate those funds will likely be at next week's meeting. So I've told the consultant to, the board is going in that direction. So I would say that it may be possible for the library piece, but for community center piece,
That's got to be further out.
that'll be further out.
Yeah.
As you're talking about sites and things like that. So.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So we'll take up the town meeting warning next week, and that would bring us up to the manager's report.
Yeah, a whole lot. Mentioned we've hired 3 new members to our fire department. Justin Soder, Alexander Lewis, and Nathan Libby. They began their employment earlier this week. They're going an 8-week training academy the department's running. So it's great to have those folks join our department here. Just to echo the comments earlier, thanks for our public safety and public works staff who are out there tonight, working hard. I think it'll be maybe a long night out there. And we did have a significant car accident last week, and I just want to recognize our emergency responders too for all their work there. Talking to Chief Collette after, and just how the response went and how the incident went, and showed the value in having our staffing the way it is to be able to staff 2 ambulances to get to that call. And I think we need 5 ambulances in all, 5 or 6
I was gonna say, the picture looked like there was a lot more than just our equipment there.
Yeah. Chief was actually the first one on scene. He was on his way to a meeting here, our staff meeting, and then I saw the police all rush out to respond. So I know it's been a big investment in the staff in the fire department the last few years, and an incident like that really illustrates the value of having that staff and that second ambulance being able to go out here. So the only other item I have is chatting with Ted, likely looking at an executive session for next meeting, see if the board would be open to a 6:30 start time on the 16th.
Works for me.
Okay.
6:30 next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Hoping I'm back.
From New York?
Yes.
I don't know. You might. It might keep you there.
Yeah, you might love it, Mike, and
Yeah.
come back.
You'll
That works for me.
call us from Broadway. Okay, so 6:30 next week.
So work for you, Terry?
Okay, Terry?
Okay, that brings us to other business. Is there any other business? Okay,
Nobody parties here in the wintertime.
yeah, I know.
It's the first.
Yeah.
Dry,
first 5
dry
or 6
January.
meetings I was like,
Yeah.
dry January.
Catering permit season.
Yeah.
So, final thoughts on agenda items from this meeting? Anything?
No, you
Certainly.
handled the police, I thought you handled the fire folks very well. Thank you for respecting that.
Okay, if there is nothing else, then we will be adjourned.